Hello, BookTube. We've continued with the bouncy cam. We are doing my library tour, and I am standing on my incredibly old bed, my old faithful bed that I have dragged all over the world. And we're going to do the next shelf here, and there are some transverse books, and there's some themes. We got it all. We got it all. So the first transverse book is C.J. Sansom. This is Heartstone, a UK trade paperback of Heartstone. These are Matthew Shardlake mysteries. They are terrifically good, and as you can tell, they get much bigger as they go along. So the author indulges more and more in a love of writing just historical fiction as opposed to historical murder mysteries, which is how they really started out, and that's fine by me. I love them. They're immersive. Then this next one is something we've seen before. This is a trade paperback of William Manchester's Death of a President, which really means that I don't need the big hardcover that we saw. So when the time comes to pare away this library, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to get rid of my goal is in the aftermath of this little bookroom library tour. My goal is to clear off almost a whole bookcase of stuff that doesn't, pretty much every book that you have in the course of this little bookroom tour, every book where I have pulled it off the shelf and said, I'm not really sure what it's doing here, or isn't this interesting, as opposed to my eyes lighting up, those are the books that need to go. They might not need to go out of my whole collection, but they definitely need to go out of this room. But that's for later. Now we're just doing this. Now the last transverse is the Silmarillion, J.R.R. Tolkien. This is a trade paperback that originally had a cover of a bunch of sleepy elves waking up in twilight, which was, by definition kind of boring. So I found a picture of a dragon and put it on the cover instead. And that was good. I used the heck out of this paperback for a while. And then I realized that the Silmarillion version that I really want, as a keeper, is the hardcover with the original dust jacket. I probably have it within reach here somewhere. The hardcover with the old style familiar illustration. That is the one that I want. And all the others I don't. And I only need one copy of the Silmarillion. So sooner or later. Okay, then we get to, I mentioned themes. Themes are not happening all that often in this little book room. That's okay. I rather embrace the chaos in here. But we do have a little theme block going on here. And I remember that it was bigger. The books in this room do get culled, just not as often as books elsewhere. But this theme is Vikings. I love the Vikings, I love the era, and I love books about them, tend to. And this is the old National Geographic volume on Vikings, which the cover is not the only original illustration. There are original illustrations all throughout. And I love these. I've mentioned before, I love these National Geographic volumes. Just think they're fantastic. Then this next one is the Oxford Illustrated History of the Vikings. And the Oxford Illustrated History series is also terrific. Just terrific. You've got illustrations and maps all throughout. But lots of history, too. So they're meaty volumes, but they're really good for, a quick visual reference. And then a few volumes on the Vikings, just, not big picture books, but actual works. This is The Viking Wars by Max Adams. I thought it was terrific. Just terrific. And then Laughing Shall I Die by Tom Shippey, one of my favorite Viking books in the last few decades. And I thought it was going to be all gaudy and, the myth of battle and whatnot, but it's actually extremely substantive. So, and then the last one, this little theme, is by Eric Christensen. This is The Norseman and the Viking Age. Slightly less adventure-oriented, slightly more scholarly overview of the people, the countries, the Viking phenomenon, but also the societies that gave rise to it, and also quietly funny in a number of different places. The author doesn't take himself or his subject too seriously, so that was an unexpected bonus. Okay, then we have Beverly Nichols. This is she was a famous author in her day. This is Down the Garden Path, her delightful book about one particular opulent garden, but also about gardening itself and the philosophy of gardening and the joys of it and whatnot. And naturally, I got this when I was in the middle of my mania about starting a garden of my own, about learning how to garden. And I haven't given up that mania. I have a perfect spot that's small enough for me to handle and perfectly situated and convenient to water and to birds and to sunlight, and yet off the beaten track. I took a lot of advice about it. A lot of it was contradictory, and the best piece of advice I got at the little old farmhouse in Vermont, which is don't grow vegetables so close to a road. Don't grow vegetables. They'll be covered. They'll be saturated with the stuff of the road, the dirt and the gas and the whatnot. Grow something else instead. Don't grow something you're going to eat this close to the road. The spot that I'm talking about is 10 feet from the road, so that's actually excellent advice. So instead, the garden that I'm thinking about in the spring will be flowers. Non-edibles, at least to me. We shall see. Actually, there's no rule that says that if I have a vegetable garden, I have to eat the produce, right? I can just be growing vegetables for the challenge of it. We'll see. I am not giving up on the idea at all. We're heading into winter now, so I don't have to think about it much. I will think about it in the spring and just turn over that earth. That was my main problem, was that it involved going outside and doing stuff. I prefer to stay inside and read, but that's not a good excuse. So then this next one is the University of Chicago Press. I sent them many a grateful email. I virtually patted them on the shoulder for this particular reprint. This is a lovely reprint of Edwin O'Connor's novel, The Last Hurrah. One of the two great American political novels ever written. And unlike the other one, All the King's Men, this is funny. It is tragicomic in a way. It has bittersweet moments all throughout. Oh my. And it is also, among other things, among many, many other things, a pitch-perfect dissection of the Irish-American experience at the turn of the 20th century in America. But it's also funny. There are comic set pieces in here that rival anything in American literature, including Mark Twain. I know this book virtually by heart, but it was out of print when the University of Chicago came out with this trade paperback. So I was overjoyed at that. Imagine the idea of getting The Last Hurrah, one of my favorite novels, with a pub sheet in it. Imagine the thrill of that. And that caused me to go on a number of different homilies about the health of the American reprint culture, about how if you're hip deep in the book business the way I am, you're going to see these reprints. You're going to see stuff that is old, that is off the byway, and who knows, I might see Beverly Nichols down the garden path. It could happen. I might see it. National Geographic might decide in 2020 to start doing full dress reprints of all of these old hardcover volumes. They have the rights to them. They would sell. They're fantastic. The Vikings, birds, animals, the Middle Ages, the Age of Shakespeare. These things would sell if they decided to reprint them, and they might. So, okay, all right. This next one is the Robert Fitzgerald translation of the Aeneid. Which has its benefits. It is not a bilingual translation. It's Judge Fitzgerald doing his thing. We saw his translation of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and this is the ancient translators' trifecta. Is if you're going to do the Iliad and the Odyssey, you do the Aeneid and then you die. Fitzgerald did the Aeneid, and it has strengths. He is an interesting composer of English verse. He's an interesting versifier in English. I have the same reservations about it that I do about any translation of any ancient classic into English. And those reservations were enough for me to give away my final trade paperback copy of this book, I think to one of you a couple of years ago. And then I was walking Frida one day and came across a box on the sidewalk with a big sign that said free. And of course, you poke your nose inside such a box. You don't stop and pick through it, but you look into it. Frida looked inside to see if there was anything alive that she could scream at, and I looked inside to see if there were any books, and there were a few books, and this was one of them. And it was in perfect condition, and the day that we found it in that free box was forecast to pour rain that night, and I just took it. I saved it. I often do this weird animism where I think that books are alive, and where I'm helping them, I'm giving them a good home, I can be neglecting them, or I can be giving them welcomed attention, when actually they're mindless collections of paper and paste. It doesn't matter. It doesn't get through. This next one is a gift from one of you. This is the best of Frank O'Connor, short stories by Frank O'Connor, who I just love. I think he's one of the great short story writers of the 20th century, and I have a couple of other collections of him, but this is my favorite. Obviously, as soon as I got this, it became my favorite. These old Everyman Library editions are so nice. Okay, this next one is a book depository purchase, the minute I became associated with BookTube and started to watch all of your channels, started to realize that BookTube is kind of in love with Book Depository. Those of you who don't know, it's a book remainder site. The books aren't particularly cheap. The shipping is free, but slow and unpredictable. And most of the editions are UK editions. And I thought, well, you don't need to order books. You get plenty of books in the mail, and you have access to used books and charity bookshops on your own, so you don't need to be ordering books online. But I thought the shipping's free, and I just look around and see if you see anything that you don't see in your normal rounds. And I did, and I have continued to. So if I were to put them all together, I have a whole shelf now of UK trade paperback books that I bought at Book Depository. And I wouldn't change a thing. In fact, I'm right about ready to make another order. It's been long enough so that I miss it. So I want to start another order. This is one of those. This is the Patrick Melrose novels of Edward St. Aubyn, in a very nice trade paperback that I would never see in the bookstore. The book, actually, I did get a free copy of this exact same anthology, and it was hideous. It had a hideous Benedict Cumberbatch movie cover on it. It was ugly. And I thought, well, okay, you can put stickers all over the cover, you can hide it or whatnot. Then I thought, no, just get rid of it in its current pristine form. Go on Book Depository and get a version that you actually like. Not something that you don't want a version on your shelf where you have hidden the things you don't like. You want a version on your shelf that is the thing you do like. So I just did that. And this is terrific. And this has all of them. This has does it list them? It doesn't list them on the back. Yeah, Nevermind, Bad News, Some Hope, Mother's Milk, and At Last. These are all the Patrick Melrose novels, and some of them are stronger than others, but they are all amazing. Just amazing. Mother's Milk is one of the most brutally sad books that I've read in English in quite some time. Some Hope, among other things, it's raucously funny, but it also has some of the best, most effective, most convincing descriptions of what it's like to be on drugs. Not, the broader lifestyle idea of, yeah, I'm a drug addict, but what it's like to actually be in the middle of a massive drug high that I've ever read in English. The books have stuff like that all throughout them. They have aspects that I don't particularly like and aspects that I actively hate. There's one aspect in particular in the made-up stories that I hate more than any other, and that is self-pity. I actually hate self-pity just in general, but in the made-up stories where your motive, or a large part of your motive for writing this thing that you're going to foist on the public and charge money for, is to feel sorry for yourself, and there's a strand that runs throughout all of these books that I don't like, but the brilliance of it, I don't think you can deny it. I just think it's amazing. So and now I have the version that I want, thanks to Book Depository. I'm just about ready to make another purchase. When I watch some British booktubers, people who see these editions that I love so much, that are so much better designed. This is better designed than the American version, plain and simple. I see these editions on British booktube channels. I watch their channels, but I don't subscribe, because then they'd know that I subscribe and they'd have to junk their channels. The British booktubers universally hate me. And when a new British booktuber shows up on the scene, the old British booktubers go to their channel or go to them privately in DMs and say, hey, really good channel, don't forget, you hate Steve Donoghue. And that is an ironclad rule. That is an Omerta-style mafia rule that simply, as far as I've seen, cannot be broken. So I know of only 2 renegades from that rule, and those 2 renegades are not liked by the British booktube group. So, but one way or another, even though they hate me because they're morons, they hate me because they're morons. It's fine. They hate me because they heard something terrible about me 4 years ago. Okay, 4 years ago, that's fine. We all work on rumors to one extent or another. They still hate me by reflex 4 years later? When lots of people they like are vocal in liking me, then that's just that they're morons. That's just that they don't ever re-examine their worldview about anything. So, I take some of what they say about books with a grain of salt, because if they don't change their opinions ever on me, they're not changing their opinions ever on anything, and I don't much see evidence of that on their channels. So, but their channels showcase books that I then want, everything that I got from Book Depository is something that I have seen on a British BookTube channel. So, where that came from, that little digression. Okay, all right, this next one. This next one I go to all the time, which is what I want. That's the exact response that I want from all of these books. I go to this all the time. That's not always going to be true, right? I mean, like for instance, yesterday we saw The Sixth Wife by Susanna Dunn, a novel about Catherine Parr. I really, really like it, but I won't go to it all the time. It's fiction. But everything, the nonfiction and the reference in here, I want everything in this room to be something I rely on a lot. And this next one, I have many different collected Shakespeares. Many. And I also have many separate Shakespeares, separate works with whole critical apparatuses of their own. But I keep going back to this, the Running Press Shakespeare. We saw the Running Press when it under Courage, the hardcover imprint for The Essential Mark Twain. And this is the whole of Shakespeare. We've got the P in plays is also the S in sonnets and the P in poems. And this is everything in one big, enormous chunk of trade paperback that you would think would be, I mean, look at that. That's 1.5 Jason heads wide. You would think this would be completely ungainly, but I love it. It's the one I want. You can't always predict which edition of something will be the one you love. You can't always predict that. There's no way that this is a more convenient or better choice as a collected Shakespeare that I will go to all the time than my Riverside Shakespeare or the Oxford Shakespeare or whatever, and yet this is the one I do go to. It has no critical apparatus to speak of. The text is crammed in tight. The book, I've reinforced this 3 or 4 times, but even so, I'm always on the lookout for new ones because these trade paperbacks can't stand the use I put them to. That's what I want. Whether it makes sense or not, that's what I want. All right, okay. We've seen this already. This is we saw the hardcover of this. This is the trade paperback of the Dennis Washburn translation of the Tale of Genji. Beautiful, beautiful trade paperback from W.W. Norton. And you know, you saw the hardcover. I have the hardcover. It's much more durable than the trade paperback. So you wonder why I have this, and I have this because it has a blurb from Open Letters Monthly on the back. In pretty good company. In pretty good company, and that happening on this book was, I mean, it happened many times before this, but happening on this book really just brought it home to me what an achievement that is, how good that feels. A literary journal that you helped to make yourself from nothing starts to get on books because of the work you put in. That feels really good. That felt really good when I saw that, especially with a book that I really love. Although it isn't a named blurb. And I think there's a bigger version on the inside, and I don't think the one on the inside is named either. The bastards. No, it's not. Named blurbs are better than non-named blurbs, but that's okay. Okay, then we have, this is Mike Ashley. This is an old Barnes & Noble reference book. I love this thing. I've written lots and lots of nonfiction on the Kings and Queens of England, lots and lots of it. And it's come in very handy with that. This is his British Kings and Queens. And this is the big version. He does a smaller version that starts with William the Conqueror or Edward the Confessor or something like this. But this starts the dawn of time. It starts right after the Romans packed up their bags and left. So you have all of the little kingdoms of southern Britain and northern Britain and Wales and whatnot, and a biography and the dates and as much as we know, but every one of the rulers of those. And then you get to the modern times and much longer entries for the kings and queens that we know, that we're familiar with. I think that's fantastic, and that's why it's a shame that there is a shorter version. The shorter version leaves all that great scholarship out. I don't know why you would do that. I've spent hours reading about those ancient kings and just pondering what their world and life was like. Just amazing to lose yourself in that book. Okay, all right, and then we'll finish up with a UK trade paperback of The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee. His book about the study of DNA, the discovery of DNA, what it is, how it works, how it manifests in human lives and health problems and whatnot. A terrific, terrific book. Not quite, for me, as great as The Emperor of All Maladies, but that's a personal thing. It's every bit as good a book, just objectively speaking. And again, this is the type of thing like the Catherine Parr book or Low Boy or The Death of Shakespeare, where I love it and I do revisit it, but not nearly as much as, for instance, my battered Shakespeare. or the British Kings and Queens, or what was it? There was another one on this shelf. The National Geographic Viking book. I go back to those a lot, and I would like it if that kind of frequency were common for this library instead of rare. But anyway, there you go. That is the next shelf, and we will bounce along Tigger style to the next shelf tomorrow. So I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.